Hi, fabulous teachers. So I know as we're getting into distance learning, or maybe you're a virtual teacher, and you're just wondering about how do I do recordings that, make sense or don't make me look crazy. So the first thing I do is, obviously make sure that you're in appropriate attire. Some people feel that they want to dress up and stay in the suits and things like that. Some dress, a little more casually. I typically dress just how I do in the classroom. This shirt and this cardigan is something my students have seen me wear before. But it's still professional, and so I'm more comfortable in this versus a blazer and things. But always make sure that your personal check is done. Um, and so, that means your hair's brushed. Sometimes I throw it up in a pony. Y'all have seen videos with it in a pony or clipped back. Today it's kind of down and wavy. So you just want to make sure that you're making that professional uh, influence on the students. Also be mindful of your background and what's behind you. The last thing you want is somebody else running behind the scenes. I've had teachers who had their, toddlers who decide to strip down and run past the recording. And that's definitely not something you want recorded. At the same time, you probably don't want children or your dogs or any of that in the background. And I will tell you, the microphones on our computers pick up everything. So do it in a time, like I'm sure you just heard my calendar alert go off on my phone. Make sure you have certain things muted or that you're in a place where it's not going to bother or distract from the other person, whether you're live or doing a recording. I bounce back and forth between two places in my house. Right now I'm sitting on my couch and it faces this wall. There's nothing in the backyard. I'm home with just my dogs right now, and they're both napping, and so there's not going to be any distractions back there. The other place you've seen will have like my gray curtains down, and that's in my kitchen. And usually when I'm talking with students or parents, I'm there when we're live. A lot of times my recordings I'll make from the couch, but those are the two places that I personally bounce back and forth between. I would not necessarily recommend that for everybody. I've had practice at working from home. I did it for 4 years in the virtual education setting. But when I first started, I needed one central location. If you find that you're working and not able to shut it off, you're going to want one central location. I recommend if you have kids in the house, you have one central location where you make all of your recordings and live videos with your students. Going to that, I keep mentioning recordings versus live videos. Live videos with my students, I always record just for documentation and security purposes so that everybody is aware. Google Hangouts and Google Meets are a great place for that. If you use some other sort of built-in, Blackboard or whiteboard collaboration, it will have a recording button. Google Meets is great because it notifies everybody that both the chat and the video are being recorded. And so that's very helpful in keeping track of all of that. I also like it because when I'm with the student and we work through a problem, I can send them that recording and they can play it again and again so that they get that repetition, and I'm not physically there, so I can help them with this is their struggle. Okay, and here's their recording, and then they can reach back out to me as they work through more problems, and at that same time I can be helping other students. Always, always check your microphone and watch your recordings. So before I do any recording, whether I'm doing it back to back or not, if you move your computer slightly, sometimes that can make an echo or muffle you. So I always check my microphone. And then I always watch my recordings. When I first started doing this, I was like, oh, I cannot listen to my voice. It was like nails on a chalkboard to me. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. But please, please, just a tip from a former virtual teacher and middle admin, watch your recordings. sometimes you catch things that don't need to be published out there. I personally use Screencast-O-Matic because it has an editing version where you can just cut things out of your recordings. Or you can blur things and different things like that. And when I say blur things, I'm not meaning background things, I'm meaning on your screen. So like if I'm showing Google Classroom and I go to the roster page, I blur out the student names so that that's FERPA friendly and not disclosing any personal information to anybody. So make sure you watch your recordings. It will get easier, I promise. And you just kind of fine tune as you go. I watched some of my very first recordings and I'm like, oh my goodness. But we learn every day. I love Rachel Hollis. I follow her on Facebook and Twitter. And something she posted a few weeks back is, don't compare your day 1 to my day 5,000. And so while we're in this distance learning, or you're starting your virtual teaching journey, don't look at everybody else's recordings and say, oh, I'm not that good, I'm just going to give up. Watch their recordings, learn what they do great, see where they could still improve, and find your own way. So watch other recordings to make yours better, not to discount yourself and say, oh, I'm not as good as that person, I'm not even going to try. Because we're all learning and we've all either done this a lot or we're taking it one day at a time. I try to limit my recording. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. That's something I always have for my recordings as well. To 15 minutes, especially when you're talking about students, right? We have about a max of 15-minute attention span. Then we get bored or something's going on, especially when we're doing distance learning or schooling at home or working at home. We might have siblings or kids or pets or somebody's at the door or the TV or whatever. And so try to make them 15 minutes. I have a few that are like 16, 17, things like that. But really try to cut it down to what's best practice. What do they need to know? And then the rest can be in notes and different things like that. So I'd love to hear what your best video recording tips are. Or if you're like, oh my goodness, I still have a question on this or that, let me know. Again, this is Holly Saporito with a SAP for Classroom Sanity.